Hello, we're here, Servants of Peace Ministries, or SOP Ministries. We're going to talk to CW today, and we're just going to go over some scripture today. What scripture do you have today, CW?
It is Galatians 6:2-6. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without compromising themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor.
Outstanding word. We're going to get into that a little bit more in just a minute, but first we're going to meet CW.
Yes, sir.
Well, first of all, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll get into your career.
My name is C.W. Robertson. I'm 47 years old, married. I have two daughters from a previous marriage, and then my current wife has a stepson. We live in Snyder, Texas. Growing up, I was born in Lubbock, lived in Idalou for the first 4 years, and then my mom and dad divorced when I was 4. We then moved to Roten, Texas, where I remained until I graduated high school. And then from there, went to college, played baseball for a little bit. Then things didn't pan out, so I ended up quitting. And then I joined the military in 1999.
Dang. 99.
Yes, sir.
You're dating yourself a little bit. So, all right, let's talk about your career.
All right, so I joined the Marine Corps in 1999. I went in as an avionics technician. Boot camp, 1999 on the West Coast. From there, I went to MCT, then went to my first school, which was in Pensacola, Florida. Graduated from there, went to my C school, and got assigned to Hueys and Cobras. And I graduated in February of 2000. So it was basically from boot camp to the time I got to the fleet was a year long. Got to my first squadron early 2000 and just did some normal training type stuff there in Camp Pendleton. 2001 was my first deployment. We went to Okinawa, Japan, and then I was assigned to the 31st MEU. While in Okinawa was when 9/11 happened and was hoping to get the call. We were scheduled to go, but our boat, the 31st MEU, was not close enough. There was another boat that was closer, so they sent them instead. And so we just kind of floated around Okinawa for the remainder of that deployment. Came back to Camp Pendleton, I believe it was in January, February of 2002. Once we got back to Camp Pendleton, we soon got word, probably 4 to 5 months after we got back from that deployment, that we were going to be going to Iraq. And so we started preparing. We were notified that we were going to be the first Huey squadron in Iraq in 2003. Long about January 2003, we loaded helicopters up on C-5s and deployed to Iraq. After about 3 weeks of in transit, we finally get to Ali al-Salam, Kuwait, where we set up shop there and waited for the war to happen. March 19th is when the line of departure was crossed. And I think I did 5 or 6 months there and then rotated back to the United States. 1 month later, I jumped ship from that squadron to another squadron that was going to Okinawa, Japan to go relieve another squadron that had been out there for 13 months. So I did a deployment with them over there to 31st MEU again. That was in the latter part of 2003. I was going to get out of the Marine Corps at that point in time, but decided I wanted to cross deck. So I stayed in Okinawa for another 7 or 8 months with another squadron. And then during that deployment is when I decided I wanted to reenlist after my first 5 years. So I reenlisted in 2000. It was 2004 is when I actually reenlisted. Finished out that deployment, came back, and then I did 2 additional deployments to Iraq, one in 05, 06, and then again in 2007. From there, I had several deployments under my belt. Was kind of tired. Had about 8 years in the Marine Corps. I decided I wanted to become an instructor, MOS instructor. So in 2008, I went to the schoolhouse. Was a MOS instructor for 3 years, and I forgot to let you know my ranks that I picked up. But by the time I got to the schoolhouse, I had got to the rank of staff sergeant. And while at the schoolhouse, became an instructor, did all the qualifications, served as nitrous chief. I'm not going to go into what all that stuff is, but I was also an instructor as well. Picked up gunny at the schoolhouse, became the phase chief for the avionics division. And then after almost 3 years there, I started looking at getting back to the fleet. I wanted to go to Afghanistan. I hadn't been yet, so I had reached out to friends of mine that were into different squadrons that were upcoming on deployments, scheduled to go to Afghanistan. As a gunny, there's only a certain amount of gunnies you can have in a squadron when it comes to avionics. The 3 squadrons that were in the pipeline to go, all were full of gunnies. So I called the monitor and I said, hey, I want to go to Afghanistan, but the 3 squadrons here are full. And he was like, well, I can send you to the East Coast. And I said, no, I'm not going to the East Coast. I'll stay on the West Coast. So it was either training squadron or it was a squadron that was shutting down in Camp Pendleton and going to stand up in Hawaii. And so I decided to, even though I was going to be non-deployable for even longer, I decided to go to that squadron that was going to shut down operations in Camp Pendleton and then stand up in Hawaii. And so we did that I left the schoolhouse in 2011 and went to the squadron that was shutting down. It was a year-long process to shut down. We moved the entire squadron to Hawaii and started standing it up out there. And then that was 2012. 2014 was my first deployment after being on instructor duty, plus shutdown stand-up of squadron, and that was in Okinawa. Again, another 31st MEU, 2014. Came back from that deployment and was getting ready to rotate. Had been in Hawaii for about 3 years. Wanted to get back to a normal deployable squadron, and went back to Camp Pendleton in 2015. Shortly thereafter, at this time I was a gunny, by the way. Got back to Pendleton and then was nominated to lead our det for the 11th MEU. And so 2016, we chopped down to Miramar, attached to a V-22 squadron, and I was the skid. Hueys and Cobras are called skids.
Yes, sir.
So I was the skid lead, or the senior enlisted for the skids down on that deployment. I did workups for 6 months and then finally deployed in October 2016. The skids went on the small deck, what's called an LPD, while the rest of the squadron went on the LHD, or I don't remember what, I think it's LHD. And that deployment ended up being a disaggregate MEU, to where the supply ship and the main ship were off doing its own thing, and then our ship was off the coast of Africa, pretty much the entire deployment, off the coast of Yemen, doing operations out there off the coast of Yemen, which ended up being an 8-month float.
Dang.
And then on that float, I picked up my next rank, my final rank, Master Sergeant E8. Ended that deployment, got back to the States. I had orders to down to Miramar. I had fought tooth and nail to try to get to an F-18 squadron. I wanted to get in a boat squadron and be deployable, but the Marine Corps had better plans for me. I ended up at what's called an intermediate level, I-level unit. I was 16 there in Miramar. The plan was, I had been getting groomed for master guns. It was going to take me a few years to pick that up. I was being groomed for that, was getting all the work hard PME for that. But then I decided to retire. Politics got in the way. I'm not a political guy. So I ended up deciding to retire and submitted my Appendix J. And right at just a little after 20 years, I retired in 2019. And so after that, I became a contractor for the Marine Corps, doing almost the same thing I was doing in the Marine Corps, but just at a little higher level. I was technically considered an engineering tech. I was kind of the bridge between the Marines on the ground and the engineers on the East Coast, what's called PMA. I did that for a year and a half, political again, and decided to resign my position and move back to Texas. And I moved back to Texas in 2020.